Even among friends, manners are important. Especially when it comes to money, make sure you are thorough. My mother repeated this often, whether something happened in the past or not. Little did I know, this advice would come in handy in such a way. My name is Sally. I'm a 30-year-old part-time worker, living with my 4-year-old daughter and my husband, Bob, an office worker. My in-laws live 2 train stops away from our rented apartment, close to Bob's office, so he often has dinner there. It might sound generous, but Bob is careless and selfish. He'd drop by his parents' house on a whim after work, not even thinking to tell me who's preparing dinner. I've warned him many times, but he just makes excuses like Mom said she's making meatloaf and mashed potatoes tonight, and doesn't apologize. Instead, my father-in-law called, asking, "Did Bob let you know he's coming over here?" Thankfully, this prevented our dinner from being wasted. While my father-in-law is considerate, my mother-in-law is snide, saying things like, "Bob just prefers my cooking over his wife's." Every time Bob visits them, she'd call, gloating, "He just feels more at ease at home." "Sally, you need to make a home where your husband wants to stay." She'd look down on me, asserting her superiority as a woman and a mother, and would barge into our apartment whenever she found the time. "Bob can't relax with this kind of cleaning. And what's this in the fridge?" She'd nitpick my cleaning and snoop through our fridge. She'd even throw out my cooking, saying, "How dare you cook such an awful meal for Bob? Any wife who doesn't take care of food is the worst. Everything you cook just goes to waste." When I pointed out, I could have eaten it instead of throwing it away. "You're the one wasting food," she'd turn red with rage and start yelling. My daughter would start crying in shock, and my mother-in-law would hurriedly leave, not wanting to be disliked by her. She's selfish and runs away when things get tough. I told Bob about her bullying, but he'd just brush it off with, "You're just imagining things," or, "She doesn't mean any harm." I was attracted by his bright and sociable nature, but that seems like a distant memory now. He's just moody, dismissing our daughter when she tries to talk to him. His standing as a father has hit rock bottom. To make matters worse, the education fund we had been saving monthly for our daughter had completely vanished. It was a withdrawal of a huge sum, $40,000. It had to be Bob, who has a family card. When I asked him about the money with certainty, he said, "Our daughter doesn't need money right now. We can save up again when it's necessary." His cavalier attitude snapped something in me. "Don't joke around. How could you just use the money we saved together like that? It's not about current need. We saved it because we don't know when we'll need it. What did you even spend it on?" "I helped out Mom." "Our money? It's mostly what I earned." "Got a problem with that?" "I contributed too. I saved from our budget cuts. I worked hard to manage that money. Your money is just birdseed." Our shouting match escalated, thankfully without waking our daughter. "That's it, we're getting a divorce. I knew you were careless, but to withdraw our child's savings without a word is unbelievable. Go ahead. Like you can make it on a part-time salary." "What?" I was at a loss for words. Seemingly satisfied with having silenced me, my husband sneered, "I'm always ready for a divorce," and went back to his room. Though I clenched my fists in frustration, I wasn't going to just cry myself to sleep. Having reached that conclusion, I began preparing for the divorce. I heard my wife talking on the phone with Bob this morning. I received that message from my father-in-law the following Friday. My mother-in-law called my husband, inviting him for a special dinner tonight, it seemed. Since Bob hadn't mentioned anything to me, he was probably planning to go without telling me again. Since the day I declared divorce and was belittled for my part-time job, Bob's attitude towards me had changed to one of disdain. "I don't need to care for a dependent like you," he'd say, scattering the laundry around and no longer cleaning the room. His nitpicking, "You call this cleaning," was just like his mother's. I saw the call from my father-in-law as the perfect opportunity and decided to put my plan into action. I timed my visit to my in-laws' house to coincide with Bob's return from work. It seemed my father-in-law hadn't returned home yet. Bob and my mother-in-law were surprised to see me, but she scoffed, "Oh. Knowing we're having sushi for dinner, you came to freeload. How despicable. You don't deserve sushi," he spat vulgarly. They clearly had no intention of letting me step inside. Their house, though a detached house, had a wooden front door that wasn't very soundproof. Their loud shouting could be heard outside. As usual, they were a selfish pair, oblivious to those around them. Unfortunately, I haven't received any message about coming for sushi. The only thing I was told by your father was that you were visiting your parents' house. Are you being sarcastic because I didn't inform you? Do I need to report my every move to a mere housemaid? Talking to my dad behind my back, as a wife, that's just creepy. He seemed to be entranced by his own abusive words. While my mother-in-law smirked in the background, my retort, "The creepy one is you," froze her smile. What did you say? It's disgusting to misinterpret your father's kindness like that. It's because you're a no-good husband who doesn't communicate. Can't you see he's just trying to be considerate? He seemed to be aware of his lack of communication. My husband bit his lip and fell silent. Then you should have declined. Causing trouble for dad and being such a brazen wife. My mother-in-law defended him, but she was just a woman of empty words. Please keep barking over there. I didn't come here to waste my time arguing with you. Let's get straight to the point. I want a divorce. What? For real? His eyes widened in genuine surprise. You think you can make it on a part-time salary? That's right, I'm not giving you our granddaughter. You can't raise her. Go apologize to Mom. I explained the situation calmly to the screaming pair. From next month, I'll be working as a full-time employee. I'm currently working part-time in medical administration. It's the place where I worked full-time before getting married. When I mentioned thinking about divorce to my colleagues, they suggested returning to full-time work. The kindergarten my daughter attends is close to this workplace. I can pick her up during my break and she can stay at the workplace's daycare until the end of my shift. They even gave me this advice. No way you can raise her alone, my mother-in-law insisted. But anticipating you'd say that, I've already arranged to live with my parents. They're taking care of my daughter today. Unlike a certain husband who just dismisses his daughter, they shower her with love and attention. What? My mother-in-law turned to Bob, who awkwardly looked down. Don't joke. That's unacceptable. Her trembling voice betrayed her agitation. A father who secretly uses the education fund is nothing but harmful. As I firmly stated that, the front door opened and my father-in-law said, "Sorry for interrupting. Can I hear more about this?" It seems that my father-in-law was listening at the front entrance. You used the education fund? What do you mean, Bob? Dad. It's not like that. Mom asked me for help with renovation funds, so I supported her. Renovation funds? My father-in-law seemed just as puzzled and asked my mother-in-law for a detailed explanation. Bob suggested me to live together. It's more economical than continuing to pay rent. And if we're going to live together, renovations are necessary, right? That's the money. I felt dizzy as new information kept coming. Living together? I haven't heard a word about that. And what's this about education fund? Sally, can you explain? I explained to my father-in-law about the money Bob had withdrawn and that we were getting a divorce. Then you should just leave. Leave the granddaughter here. I'll take care of her. My mother-in-law insisted, trembling. No, this was a decision made by my husband. I can't stoop so low as to break a promise between spouses. Huh? I don't recall agreeing to anything like that. I thought to myself, pulling out a file from my bag and showing it to them. This is the pledge we made when saving for the education fund. Knowing Bob's carelessness, I had documented our agreement just in case. Always document anything related to money. It's one of the lessons from my mother. Bob's signature is here, my father-in-law noted, sounding impressed. What? Why is this written here? Bob panicked, likely having signed without reading. Simply put, the agreement stated that if the education funds were used for anything else, it would lead to an immediate divorce. If there were children involved, custody would go to the other parent. If he couldn't comply, he'd have to pay twice the amount used, granting me the right to file for divorce mediation. That's the gist of it. In this case, Bob would lose custody and, if unable to comply, would owe me $80,000, giving me the opportunity to pursue divorce mediation. If you listen to your mother, it will be a dispute with a payment of $80,000. I've collected plenty of evidence of your usual attitude and your mother's treatment towards me, so you can guess who'll get custody in mediation. I smiled slyly, and my husband let out a small gasp, in surprise. My father-in-law heaved a big sigh and told my mother-in-law. For now, return the money Bob gave to you. You haven't started the renovations, right? The money should still be there. Upon hearing this, my husband's face brightened immediately. He might have thought the return of the education fund would make the divorce impossible. My mother-in-law, facing his expectant look, turned pale and shook her head. It's gone. I've already spent it. A weak voice responded, and everyone exclaimed in surprise, what? My mother-in-law was trembling and fell silent. There was a bag I wanted, and some clothes too. I just intended to borrow them, but I couldn't resist. Then she confessed. I was speechless with disbelief, but my father-in-law responded quickly. Don't be ridiculous. What were you thinking? But Bob said we could save up again for the granddaughter's education fund, so I thought it would be fine. What? You knew it was for our daughter's education and still spend it? How can you even say you won't hand over the granddaughter? Who's the despicable one here? You and Bob are nothing but harmful. The worst kind of parent and child. I said, my anger peaking and my voice colder than I expected. My mother-in-law just gaped pathetically. I'm sorry, but I no longer want to be part of this family. I agree. They're nothing but poison to our precious granddaughter. My mother-in-law broke down in tears at Phil's words. After that, I divorced Bob. Thanks to the evidence of mistreatment and the pledge, the child support and property division went as I hoped. The education fund, a third of which was from my salary, along with the alimony, totaled $50,000, which I received. According to my ex-husband, he apparently had a hard time coming up with the money. My mother-in-law had to sell all the branded goods and jewelry she had bought, and the remaining amount was covered by my father-in-law. Helping your wife is a husband's job, isn't it? My ex-husband and she blamed my father-in-law, but he got furious and cut ties with both of them. Initially, my ex-husband approached my mother-in-law about living together because he messed up a project at work and was demoted. With a reduced salary, they couldn't afford the apartment rent and had to rent a small apartment. Their only way to raise money was by canceling their life insurance policies. Combining the money returned from each policy, they somehow managed to meet the repayment amount. My ex-husband probably wanted sympathy when he reported the completed payment and talked about his struggles. The ex-husband spoke of his struggles when reporting the completion of payment. I just responded with a "huh" and let it slide. Then he shouted over the phone, "Don't you have a word of gratitude?" "No, I don't. I have grievances, so how about adding that to the bill and charge you?" I suggested, and he fell silent, so I hung up and changed my contact information. That was the last time he contacted me, but apparently, my mother-in-law asked my father-in-law for reconciliation. He obviously refused, but from what he heard, their situation was terrible. Their spending habits hadn't changed, and their household finances were in shambles. Blaming each other, the once loving parent-child duo now lived days full of arguments. "He's your beloved son, isn't he?" my father-in-law said sarcastically. My mother-in-law responded, "He's nothing but an annoying money pit. Whether it's parents and children or spouses, you need to be clear about money matters." Receiving my mother's teaching, I felt deep down that it was a good thing.